Hello, Jihye Jang. It's Professor Sanchez. So I sent you the link for your meeting at 12 o'clock, okay? Okay, so I'll wait for you to join in. I sent it by email, yeah. All right. Hi, can you hear me? Hi. Hello. Hi. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, so let's talk about your paper and let me share its screen. And here's your paper. And so you can see the paper and it states, so let me save it again, just in case we make some more changes, and I'll send that to you also. And I'll make put a 2 there to show it's the second copy. So of course, one of my tasks is to help you polish your English, your wonderful English, to make it even better than it already is at your wonderful level. So I understand everything that you're writing. It's just a matter of making it even better. And so some points that I learned from good writers is that typically you want to avoid using there as a form of passive voice. So you can see when you avoid using the verb there as a form of passive voice, you also reduce the length of the amount of words you use, and you also make a more powerful point. So you say there were 2 times when. So you say there were 2 times when the U.S. economy deteriorated. You say the U.S. economy deteriorated 2 times. The first was so it's just more impactful, right? The U.S. economy deteriorated 2 times. The first one, and I would guess I would put a period there. You always also want to make your sentences as short as possible.
Yeah.
More impact. So the first was the Great Depression. The second was the oil shock. The first oil shock, which took place from 1973 to 1974, occurred when OPEC, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, Libya, Iraq, and Iran cut oil under agreement and raised oil prices. Actually, Iran did not participate in the first oil shock. I should notice that because Iran, they continue to sell their oil. Iran's not an Arab country. These were Arab countries.
Yeah.
And they were furious about support for, they were trying to demonstrate support against Israel and support for their allies, Arab allies fighting Israel in 1973. So Iran didn't really cut its oil. It benefited greatly because they did. I think I would therefore cross that out. And raised crude oil prices. Yeah, I mean, oil prices went up 4 times in price. It has intensified the recession and unemployment problem in the U.S. economy by dealing a huge blow to the economy of countries that rely heavily on oil in the Middle East. Since then, the second oil shock occurred in 1970, and that occurred because there was the Iranian Revolution. In 1979, that overthrew the Shah, the American agent who had been ruling Iran since 1953, and then Saddam Hussein attacked Iran in 1980, and that also disrupted oil supplies coming from the Middle East, and it caused again the second oil shock. Since then, the second oil shock has occurred in 1979, and inflation has accelerated due to rising production costs, slowing growth rates in countries around the world, and worsening trade balance. As a result, stagflation occurred in which prices rose during the economic recession. The American side tried to recover from this, but it was difficult to recover from the oil shock in a short period of time, which shook the welfare state theory based on optimistic worldview in American society. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, that point was made by people like Milton Friedman became really popular at this time. Milton Friedman was advocating what we call today neoliberalism, and Friedrich Hayek, and they said, you know, we need to cut taxes, we need to free up the markets, and that dominated American policymaking thinking until 2008, basically, when the Great Recession began and the world financial crisis began. So after collapsing in the 25-year era of glory, the United States returned to the welfare state system. And so I suggest, by the way, you know, I don't want to just tell you how I would write it. I want you to choose how you would prefer to write it. So I make suggestions, choose one, or you can rewrite it however you want to.
Yeah.
But I think the student learns more if I make suggestions and they choose what they want to how they want to write it, because then they view it as if they view the words belong to them rather than me tell you, right? So I suggest that you might want to rephrase that unreasonable for state system, it's undesirable to the middle class or unloved by the middle class. So either one's okay, but it's up to you to choose.
Yeah.
They, or the American electorate, turned to stable conservatism due to stable finance by President Ronald Reagan, who advocated Reaganomics and tried to restore the collapse of the kind of 1980s. So I break up the sentence because it's kind of long, it's a run-on. Yeah, I mean, Ronald Reagan and neoliberalism and Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain was doing something similar. And in fact, describing the 1960s as an era of resistance from young people, such as women's organization to promote women's rights, is not an exaggeration, right? Okay. Yeah, again, I also say avoid using the pronoun it as a form of passive voice in scholarly writing to reduce verbiage. So, and again, it's a common American tendency to do that as well, but like in scholarly writing, you can just say, you can see if you reword the sentence to get rid of the use of the word it, as a adverb, you make the sentence more impactful. They have been willing to change American society and have constantly expressed new social movements. Accordingly, American society could change into a more democratic and open society than before. For example, demands for legal abortion was created through the women's movement. So which do you prefer, pressure for or demands for?
Demands.
Okay. Okay, I'll just cross that out and let you fix it up. Okay. and cross that out here. Demands for, and what do you prefer here? I missed this. After collapsing, undesirable, unloved by the middle class?
Undesirable.
Okay. Although, you know, Americans still, they love their welfare programs that serve the middle class, like, for example, Social Security, and they like loan programs that provide loans for students to go to college, but they tend to, Americans tend to view poor people, the welfare state, as serving the interests of lazy poor people. That's unfair, but that's how Americans view the big powerful state because of their history, how they were founded, and their political culture, like we talked about in through the semester. So that people are inconsistent in their thinking. At the same time as they say, oh, I think big government is bad, at the same time they want the government benefits that have been established over the last 80 years of the development of the American welfare state beginning in the 1930s. So it's a big issue today because Joe Biden is president of the United States, and he's advocating expanding welfare state policies to accommodate the changing American economy, with more women having to vote. And that means more women having to work. They must work. And that means there must be daycare for the children so that they can go to work, and they need support, and they're not. But at the same time, as Americans like their individual benefits, when you ask them if they support a stronger role for government in managing American economy and American society, typically they say no, even though they believe that they might be experiencing serious problems, but typically they fall back to stereotypical notions of what are the sources of those problems. I mean, people who are not really deeply informed or closely informed, or who do not have close attention to American politics, if they know there's a problem, or if they feel like that there's some kind of crisis or problem confronting them in America, they will tend to revert back to traditional American stereotypes, stereotypical answers as to what are the source of the problems are. The problem is too much government, too much taxation, too much money going to poor people. Even if that, because they fall back into what they emotionally feel if they do not have great degree of information, and that's a theme that emerges in studies of American voting behavior. Most Americans know little about American policies. They don't know very much or pay close attention to politics. They don't even read the newspaper. They don't follow news closely, and so even if they're unhappy, they might not say, well, I support expanding the welfare state. Typically, they express their unhappiness by voting, for example, for Donald Trump, because he's traditional American. He gives you traditional American responses to problems, which is free market, big government bad. Not everybody, but a lot of people, particularly among white people. So again, they have been willing to, okay, through the women's movement. Okay, so keep in mind again that, yeah, I mean, that was an important, and it's an important point today, because there's a lot of discussion going on in the United States about abortion, that the US Supreme Court is again hearing cases right now about restricting access to abortion. And there's some concern that this court that's now in place in 2021 might overturn Roe versus Wade from 1973. The abortion was never legalized by an act of Congress. It wasn't done by Congress passing laws. It was done by a Supreme Court decision of 7 in favor, 2 against. And so the Supreme Court, I would bet, in the case it's hearing right now regarding Mississippi, that it heard last Friday, that it's going to continue to allow more and more restrictions placed on abortion. But again, the white reactionary populist movement that supported Donald Trump, they want to overturn Roe versus Wade. And they claim that, it's a case of judicial tyranny. It was not the wishes of the will of the American people. It was a Supreme Court decision that did this. And of course, it was true regarding the overturning of segregation under Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, that ended segregation of white versus against black people, that black people had to be separated and go to separate schools, separate universities. That was not also changed through an act of Congress at first. It was first changed through a Supreme Court decision, 1954. Then the US Congress intervened in the 60s, 10 years later. But again, so however, in the 1970s, young people began to be skeptical of the revolutionary idealism of the previous generation. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people became disillusioned, including young people, so that by the 1990s, young people were very conservative in America. You go on here. The social atmosphere changed considerably in the 1970s because Americans became more interested in individual problems than in social problems. And so they were, Howard Zinn, he's a Marxist. I mean, he was a Marxist. He's been gone for 11 years. And one of the issues with Marxists, or a lot of Marxist theories, that typically it tries to understand why do not a group of Americans or Italians or Koreans or Russians or Chinese, why might they not understand their objective class interests? And they fall back to this notion that basically people are suffering various forms of mind control. I mean, that's a harsh term. There's another term that emerged during the Korean War, brainwashing. There's a scientific term for it called Gramscian hegemony, that people basically do not understand because they're being fooled, they're being tricked. So they become unhappy and they blame Black people. Why am I not making as much money as I should my job? It's because of big government supporting Black people. It's because of too much government intervention in the economy. They come up with responses that Marxists often view as a product of capitalist brainwashing. And the problem with that orientation is that it easily slips into viewing the world in terms of conspiracy theories. That there's a conspiracy of capitalists controlling the media, controlling the schools, controlling through the banks, and controlling the politicians, who through their hidden secret control, they fool the American people or the Korean people or the whatever people to not understand what is the true source of their unhappiness, which is their exploitation by the rich capitalists. And so that's what someone like Zinn and others might fall back to, that basically conservatives, through their control of corporations and banks, incentivize media companies, entertainment companies, and their allies in the media, including in the news media, to understand the source of their unhappiness in terms of blaming other people rather than the true source of their unhappiness, which is capitalist exploitation. So, and that sometimes vaguely emerges in Zinn. So, like, how can it be that, how can someone like Donald Trump become president? I mean, if Americans are increasingly unhappy about their economic situation because of growing income inequality, I mean, Zinn's been dead for 11 years. How would Howard Zinn explain how somebody like Donald Trump, who is the worst of American capitalism in Howard Zinn's view, if Howard Zinn were alive today, he would call Donald Trump the worst of everything, the worst example of what is bad in America today. He's an example of what is bad about America in one person that's possible. And he's a white racist who makes white people believe that if they're unhappy, that the reason why they're unhappy is because Black people and Hispanic people and colored people are too powerful. And big government is taxing to take money from hardworking Americans to give it to those lazy Black people. And he won the election. This horrible thing. And Zinn would say it's because they've been, many Americans have been conditioned to respond positively to Trump, going way back, to Ronald Reagan, if not before. Going back to Richard Nixon. I mean, Richard Nixon and Ronald, I mean, as highlighted in the course, right, that there is a sources of modern American conservatism going back to the back to the 1950s, focusing upon the welfare state and socialist paranoia about communism going back to the 50s, but particularly emerging in the 1960s with reaction to the welfare state programs of the Democrats. I mean, and Zinn would have to say, clearly, Donald Trump is not the solution to the problems of American white working class people. Mm-hmm. He's clearly not. They do not understand. Clearly, they do not understand. Because that's what Marxist theory really emphasizes, that people have objective interests. They're class interests. They may or may not understand them, but they are objectively true. And they might be fooled and brainwashed, but sooner or later, if they do not understand their class interests, they're going to suffer more and more and more until finally there's some horrible disaster like World War II. And so how do you explain how and he would say, well, you have to look at, for example, Donald Trump's friends and supporters, even people who hate Donald Trump, who supported him. They hate him personally, but they support him because he promised to cut taxes. He was going to be good for business. He was going to reduce regulation for the environment. And they backed him up, even though they knew he was a horrible human being, because he could win. And what was his major achievement? What was Donald Trump's major legislative achievement? Cutting taxes. The one thing he did was cut taxes for the rich. Back in 2017. That was the one thing, the one legislative accomplishment that he achieved. Taxes for the rich. Everything else is BS, is camouflage, is trickery. To serve the interests of the rich bourgeoisie. That's how communists always fall back. They don't take nationalism seriously. I don't think they take it seriously enough. You know, I mean, rather than view it as trickery, as propaganda, we have to take it seriously. People need to have, even if we don't like it, they have a predisposition to form in groups versus out groups. It always emerges, and to believe that they're going to form one big proletariat global in group against the rich industrialists, it's never worked. Even though Karl Marx predicted it when he said, "Workers of the world, unite. The only thing you have to lose is your chains." We always see that class interest in a crisis is defeated by ethnic or territorial or racial nationalism or sectarian nationalism. But that's Zinn, people Marxists, they tend to suspect that this is all basically a result of trickery. People are fooled, and sooner or later they will learn, because they will suffer so much that they will learn to recognize their true objective class interests and resist effectively. And, you know, I mean, like I said, if it were not for the pandemic, I don't know, I think Donald Trump would have gotten reelected. The result that Americans and then focused on, okay, so will we stop here? They were more immersed in individual self-realization development than in the welfare and equality of society as a whole. Therefore, they pay attention to hobbies such as jogging and yoga, which are helpful for their health and pleasure. Consumption, consume, focus upon yourself, focus upon your, don't think about the well-being of other people, in the sense that Americans were more increasingly interested in things related to individual survival, so-called the Meek Decade. Since the past, politicians in the United States have used force against, of course, other countries extremely while implementing a New Deal policy for citizens. Perhaps the ideology of that state of that time began to solidify in the 1970s. There are people, Marxists that I know, who they think Howard Zinn, he likes Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal people too much. That Howard Zinn is not radical enough, right?
Yeah.
That Howard Zinn thinks that the answer is through the liberal democratic state. Other more radical Marxists say, no, it's not going to work, because as long as you have capitalism, the democratic political system is not going to solve the fundamental problems. I don't know. I mean, first off, you have to define capitalism. I mean, you know, I mean, if capitalism is private property and private enterprise and accumulation, I mean, we see the state can play important roles in facilitating that process, not just in China. I mean, like 1/3 of the Chinese economy is still controlled by state corporations. But even those, the private companies in China, like the banks, they still do what they're told by the Chinese government. And that's true in the US too. I mean, so much of the US economy is connected to the military industrial infrastructure to supply the US military and US security bureaucracies that created during the Cold War. I mean, so much of the US economy is shaped by the state. Even though they're private companies, they still supply the Defense Department. They supply, and they get hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of business from supplying the Defense Department, the CIA. And so I don't really know what they mean when they say the problem is capitalism, because there's so many infinite versions of capitalism. The result that the Americans in the 1970s focused on individual self-realization and welfare and equality as a whole was revealed in the 2016 election. Unlike Hillary Clinton, who wants to well live together. Well, I don't know if, you know, the problem with Hillary Clinton is that she seemed to be a white version of Democrat. She think a white female version of Democratic politicians whose primary concern was to win elections. They're not really concerned, and that means winning elections in America. That doesn't mean radically transforming America. Mm-hmm. You know, she's a female version of her husband, right? Which, and she's not alone. So is Joe Biden. So is John Kerry. All of those people, Clinton, John Kerry, Joe Biden, when they were senators, they voted to approve George W. Bush's request for support to invade Iraq. They all voted in favor of supporting the invasion of Iraq, even though there was lots of evidence that Saddam Hussein was not responsible for the September 11, 2001 attacks. But I'll tell you why they voted for it. They voted yes because they knew that they could never become president if they voted no. Even if the war was wrong, they knew that if they voted no, their political career, because of their dreams of becoming president, was not going to succeed. So you have to support the president when the president says it's time to go to war, even if it was a stupid idea. And we kind of, a lot of Americans kind of accept that in men, like, well, yeah, we kind of expect men to be driven by power because that's what men do. Men like power, right? But when a woman acts like that, a lot of Americans, they get more hostile because a woman's supposed to be, you know, different. And Hillary Clinton, you know, she's power driven, primarily power driven. That just like her husband, just like Joe Biden, just like John Kerry, they're primary, not only, but primarily personal power driven. Not only, but primarily. And so, and that reduced the enthusiasm. I mean, Hillary Clinton, I don't know if she expected that the enthusiasm of a woman becoming president just by its own sake, even regardless of what she stood for, was going to motivate Americans to vote for her. And I don't know, I mean, how much to make about that? I mean, she's not the first president of a female president of a powerful country. Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister of Britain in 1979. But feminists never include Margaret Thatcher in their models of success. They never include Margaret Thatcher. I guess it's because Margaret Thatcher showed that if a woman wants to become leader in Britain, she has to be act more like a man than the men do. She was more of a conservative male politician in the Conservative Party than most male conservative politicians. So she doesn't count because women are supposed to be different. They're supposed to provide new answers and new perspectives. And Margaret Thatcher was a female version of Ronald Reagan. So they never say, yeah, Margaret Thatcher. Woo! No, they don't do that. So Hillary Clinton, she tried to be pro-left, but she didn't have much success. Anyway, so do you have any questions?
Or which part do I have to revise or support?
Well, I think that basically I said, please see comments. How much do you think dislike of Hillary Clinton played a role in helping Donald Trump win? Maybe not so much. Some people say, well, we're not for, the emails and the role of the Russians in dumping emails and helping, Trump. But how much do you think that the hostility towards new models of womanhood, of new models of women leadership in America played a role in motivating hostile reaction to Hillary Clinton, so that Donald Trump, because Donald Trump won the election only by like 70,000 votes. He got 3 million less votes than Hillary Clinton, but he got enough votes to win in the key states in Ohio, and Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan. So I think that we have to stop there, though, because I have to go on and meet with the next person. So let me go back to the send and go like here, and go like here, and go here, and reply, and go like here, and go here, and go here. Come on, and go here, and go public meeting. Here, here, here. Okay. Okay, I'll send you the video link as well. Okay.
Right.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.